Niccolo Machiavelli, the late 15th century politician, was a man whose name is a byword for immorality and political scheming. This is how he instructed diplomat Raffaello Girolami to play politics when it comes to European interstates affairs. Occasionally, words must serve to veil the facts. But let this happen in such a way that no one becomes aware of it. Or if it should be noticed, excuses must be at hand to be produced immediately. Centuries on, and Machiavelli's theories in European politics are still alive and enforced. Putting his teachings in perspective, it would be hardly surprising to understand French politicians' strange maneuvers. They pose as defenders of human rights and democracy, while behind the scenes act as culprits in Saudi crimes in Yemen. It was back in January when French Defense Minister insisted on a radio show that France is keeping a distance from Saudi and Emirati crimes in Yemen. She said, "To my knowledge, French weapons are not being used in any offensive in the war in Yemen. I do not have any evidence that would lead me to believe that French arms are behind the origins of civilian victims in Yemen." No one knows what was in her Machiavellian mind during the radio show, but even staunch advocates of French arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates knew she was lying.
Rien ne serait pire.
She was not alone in defending the dirty business. Her comments were echoed in French President Emmanuel Macron's remarks later, telling reporters, "Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are allies of France and allies in the fight against terrorism. We accept responsibility for that." He claimed that arms exports were overseen by a government committee that had demanded guarantees that the weapons would not be used against civilians. He was simply lying too. His government is still pushing for arms sales to the regimes. France, the world's third biggest arms exporter, counts Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as major clients and has resisted pressure to stop arms sales to the two regimes. It is Saudi Arabia's third biggest provider behind the United States and the United Kingdom.
For me, myself, the first weapons that I have seen through social media or videos posted by some friends or some people in Yemen, it was French weapons, especially the French tanks called Leclercs. Those tanks were used to invade Aden and to invade the coast of Yemen. I've seen those pictures of those tanks before actually seeing.
But Paris's role in the bloody conflict in Yemen is not restricted to providing lethal arms. It is also acting as a broker for Riyadh. It is now evident that the Saudi regime and its allies' strategies in Yemen suffer a complete collapse, and the aggressors are not going to win the war against the poorest Arab country. This has been concluded by almost all Western political think tanks and intelligence authorities, among them the French Ministry of Defense. According to a highly classified document produced by the French Directorate of Military Intelligence, leaked and published by the Intercept website, Saudi military capabilities in Yemen are seriously under question. The document describes the Saudis as operating ineffectively and characterizing their efforts to secure their border with Yemen as a failure.
Yemenis, as they are naturally fierce fighters. All Yemenis are carrying guns. So they have no choice. Otherwise, if they stay at home, they will stay with no salaries. There is cholera, there is malnutrition, there is famine, and there is starvation, and no salaries, and they have no choice other than to fight, or will be die at home. So they prefer to go to the field battles to fight there, and if they die, it's better for them to die while fighting rather than being killed in the schools or at homes or the street or hospitals or markets while taking care of their own affairs. So it's better for them to die in the field battles.
The report also catalogues the wide range of French-made weaponry used against Yemeni people. The French Ministry of Defense also concludes that the crimes in Yemen could not go on as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are overwhelmingly dependent on Western-produced weapon systems to wage their devastating war in Yemen. Élysée Palace also stands on the wrong side of history, being directly involved in the Saudi war on Yemen.
French personnel are stationed in Saudi Arabia to provide Saudi logistic supplies, to fly their fighter jet, to support those terrorists, especially in the coast of Yemen. 300,000 Yemeni civilians have died because of the blockade, 17,000 because of direct airstrike, and France is the third country in supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. So they bear the third responsibility of third of casualty in Yemen. Over 100,000 Yemeni civilians are killed directly or indirectly by French weapons, and French people are have the responsibility of each killing in Yemen by using the French weapons.
A sea blockade by the French Navy happened just when the United Nations warned that the inhumane act risks the worst famine for a century, renewing calls for a war crimes probe in Yemen.
The weapons and the type of weapons that's given to those extremists, as they say, and terrorist group by United Arab Emirates, the same weapons that are made by French people, by a French company, are given to those same groups. Those groups actually don't recognize the so-called Hadi legitimacy, which is stationed in Saudi Arabia hotels. They do recognize only United Arab Emirates, and they recognize only themselves. So how can the French people actually let their government directly provide weapons to those terrorists? And we have seen many attacks and terrorist attacks on France, and which was covered all over the media. Why are you staying silent about the same groups that are conducting those attacks in France and other areas are actually being directly supported from United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, using your weapons, using your intelligence, using your information you give into Saudi Arabia?
While posing as the defender of human rights across the globe, residents of Élysée seize every opportunity to profit from the Yemeni bloodbath. It is now revealed that Paris was preparing for Saudi aggression well before it started. Paris is trying to fill in for the US and UK arms, whether they are being used against Yemeni civilians or used to crush any democratic movements by the autocratic petty regimes in the Middle East.